Welcome to Author Stories, the podcast where we talk to the best writers in the industry and discuss writing and the creative process. Whether you're a writer, a reader, or both, we hope you'll find something here that makes you love books and the writers that create them. You can find archives of all of the great conversations I've had with authors over the years at hankgarner.com. Take some time and browse around there. I'm sure you'll find a new author to love, find inspiration for your own creative life, and find a new story to get lost in. Let's thank some sponsors who make the show possible. Vedic by K.J. Heritage. The dead don't always die. Top company scientist Chin Jelinek has committed suicide. Vedic, a half-alive empath with no memory of who or what he is, will die in 6 hours if he can't find out why, or so the company tells him, an added incentive to get the job done. Our hero soon discovers he is one of the skilled, a genetically enhanced human revered and despised in equal measure, a bloodhound with a terrifying past who'll stop at nothing in his pursuit of the truth. And the skilled always get their guy, don't they? Vedic, number 1, by K.J. Heritage, on sale now. There's a link to it in the show notes. K.J. Heritage's uncanny sense of pacing and story puts him at the forefront of today's speculative fiction writers. Gritty, intense, and compelling, Vedic is something you don't run into often enough in sci-fi, a cerebral thrill ride you don't want to end. Prepare to lose sleep reading Vedic, delicious science fiction. That's what other people are saying about it. Find out for yourself. Vedic, the first book in the series by K.J. Heritage. Jasper T. Scott. His box set Dark Space, the complete series. This is 6 books bundled together, on sale now for 99 cents. 6 complete books, over 600,000 copies sold. More than 2,000 pages of epic space opera for the low price of 99 cents. Also available in Kindle Unlimited if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber. Humanity is defeated. 10 years ago, the Scythians invaded the galaxy with one goal: to wipe out the human race. Now the survivors are hiding in the last human sector of the galaxy, Dark Space, once a place of exile for criminals, now the last refuge of mankind. The once galaxy-spanning Imperium of star systems is left guarding the gate, which is the only way in or out of Dark Space, but not everyone is satisfied with their governance. Freelancer and ex-convict Ethan Ortain is on the run. He owes crime lord Alec Barandi 10,000 souls, and his ship is badly damaged. When Barandi catches up with him, he makes an offer Ethan can't refuse. Ethan must infiltrate and sabotage the Valiant, the Imperial Star System's fleet carrier which stands guarding the entrance of Dark Space, and then his debt will be cleared. While Ethan is still undecided about what he'll do, he realizes that the Imperium has been lying and putting all of Dark Space at risk. Now Brandi's plan is starting to look like a necessary evil, but before Ethan can act on it, he discovers that the real plan was much more sinister than what he was told, and he will be lucky to escape the Valiant alive. Grab all 6 books for 99 cents right now. Dark Space, the complete series by Jasper T. Scott. The Unwelcome Trilogy by R.D. Brady. Survivor, Mother, Leader, and Humanity's Last Chance. Deep within the remnants of the United States, Lila Richards oversees a camp of 200 survivors. In a world where living is an everyday struggle, and only through banding together can people survive, the arrival of the unwelcome only made her job harder. Riley Quinn and Miles Jones have been raised by Lila for the last 5 years. They're also one of the cursed, the children between the ages of 13 and 18, whom the unwelcome kill on sight. No questions, no pleas, just death. Protecting one another and the people of their camp is ingrained in all of them, but now each of them faces increased danger as the reason why the cursed have been targeted by the unwelcome slowly comes to light, and that truth will shock them to their core. Now time is running out, not just for the cursed who are being hunted down by the unwelcome, not just for Lila and her family who will face the greatest challenge yet, but for all of humanity. The world changed radically 35 years ago, but today humanity's very existence is on the line, and the fight has begun that will ensure its future or its annihilation. Fans of A.G. Riddle, James Rollins, Suzanne Collins, and Brandon Sanderson will love the Unwelcome Trilogy. Pick up your copy of the Unwelcome Trilogy on Amazon today. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am super excited to have Lisa Tognola on the show with me today. She has a fantastic new book. It's called As Long as It's Perfect, and it's a new novel that's getting rave reviews. I know you guys are really going to love it. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Why, thank you very much, Hank. It's wonderful to be here, and greetings from the Garden State.
Well, I'm super excited to have you with me. We begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Well, that is easy because it's a very distinct memory in my mind. I was at a friend's wedding, so I was already a young adult, and Stephanie was getting married, and she's somebody that I grew up with. And when we were growing up, we had lots of sleepovers together, and she had a huge Saint Bernard named Gretchen who took up half the kitchen, but her family adored the dog. So I wrote a speech that I read during her wedding. And I wrote it kind of hastily because it wasn't anything that I knew ahead of time I was going to do, but it just suddenly all these memories and these loving memories of our childhood together and all the memories we shared and this and long enduring friendship came just flooding out of me, and I just poured out of me, and I wrote it all down on a cocktail napkin. And while I was giving this speech, I shared memories, and then I turned to Stephanie's fiance, Steve, and I said, Steve, if Stephanie's family could love a 250-pound slobbering dog like Gretchen, then you're a shoo-in. And, I got a laugh, and, laughter is contagious when it's a big audience like that. And it was really the first, the laugh of my life. And it was just the greatest feeling ever. And it was just this pivotal moment that sparked my love of storytelling and showed me that joy of connecting with an audience.
Oh, and I'll tell you what, there's nothing more intoxicating than getting a laugh out of a group of people. That will spark you more than just about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to know that I've brought a smile to someone's face, and our world now is just so loaded with heaviness and depressing news. Yeah, that now more than ever, it really brings me joy to be able to write stories that do weave some humor through them, which my book, even though it's a drama and it's a comedy, so I call it a dramedy. And I weave both together to create my story.
Well, if you don't find something to laugh about in life, it's going to go not very well. And if you're a writer, if you can help other people find those places where you can laugh in life, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
So, were you a big reader as a kid, Lisa?
I was a big reader. I have very fond memories of being at the public library as a child. It was one of my favorite places, and I loved their summer reading program. And every summer they had a new theme. And every few days I'd ask my mom, will you drive me to the library? And she'd take me, and I'd sit on those low chairs, and I'd swing my legs while I summarized the book in a whispered speech. And I can remember that quiet still of the room. And there was this feeling of excitement when I would follow the librarian to this big wall. And it was so thrilling to watch her move my little marker forward, one step closer to the finish line. I loved books, but I also loved the challenge of reading them that this program offered. So yes, I've been an avid writer and reader from a young age.
Do you remember what was the first or maybe the most impactful book or series or author that you discovered?
Oh gosh, I remember a book called Miss Hickory, and it was one, I think it's a very old book, and my mother, it was a favorite of hers, and I don't really recall the details. I think it had a very tragic ending, like her head being chomped off by a chipmunk or something, but I think that it really, it for whatever reason, it stayed with me. It held my interest, and I can still picture her, this twiggy figure in my head. And I think that is the magic of reading, is that even, gosh, many, many decades later, I still have, even if it's a blurry one, some nuggets of story and fondness and nostalgia in my mind for this book.
Most of us who get into writing don't immediately pursue that when we get out of school and start, making our way through life. A lot of times the path for a writer is a circuitous one, and we go through many different things on the way. What about you? Did you know from the beginning that you were going to be a writer, or has this been something that you have picked up along the way?
It's been a meandering path. I did do some writing in college. I was a reporter for the college newspaper. It wasn't necessarily my dream. I didn't pursue journalism as a career. However, I think it was lingering in the back of my mind. I did a lot of academic writing in graduate school, but it wasn't until I was actually a stay-at-home mom living in the suburbs, and this was back in 2009, that I became a news reporter the day a pastor was murdered in my town. Yeah,
well, that's a way to start.
Yeah, I drove by the crime scene on my way home. It had just occurred, and I contacted the editor of our local newspaper, and I asked him if I could write the story. And he said, "It's yours if you can hand it to me by midnight." And I turned that. I worked furiously at my computer, tap, tap, tap. I sent my husband down to take photographs, and I turned that piece in at the 11th hour, and I broke the story, and it made headline news the next day. And it was sad, it was tragic, it was scandalous, but it was also a career break for me. And the piece got picked up by Reuters, and I got hired by the newspaper, and that my beat became human interest stories, because I realized how much I loved telling people stories. And then that ended up being a stepping stone into what my heart was really set on, being a humor columnist. And so I pitched it to him, and that's when I launched a humor column called Main Street Musings. And I just adored touching people's lives in some way and writing about things that they could relate to. It was really gratifying and just warmed my heart when people would tell me that they had read my column and enjoyed it and looked forward to it week to week.
So from a murdered pastor to a story that broke and got picked up by Reuters to a human interest column to a humor column, that makes perfect sense to me. And I'm not being facetious. I completely see the path there. That you said that humor was something that you always wanted to do. What was it? I mean, is it like what we talked about earlier? Just the wanting to connect with people and to bring a smile to their face? What had you thought writing a humor column would be, and did it live up to your expectations?
Well, that's a good question. I think that humor evolved from my upbringing. I come from a pretty funny family. We'd all sit around the kitchen table and throw jabs at each other, and it was playful. A lot of lowbrow humor that probably wouldn't be appropriate for the show, but it stems from there. And then it was so much fun incorporating a sense of humor into, even some of the silliest topics that I would write on. For instance, one was a piece on Malamars, which is a chocolate cookie that is a seasonal cookie only available from fall to winter on the East Coast. And there's almost a cult culture around them, and my family just became absolutely addicted. So I wrote a fun parody about how we were addicted to Malamars, and we'd go to these great lengths to get them, and I'd fill up my cart, and we'd hide them throughout the house, and so these fun pieces that people could relate to, and then I would connect with my readers because people would reply to my article, or they'd text me, email me, and let me know when they saw them at ShopRite and when they were in for the season. Guess what? I saw Malamars at Stop and Shop. They're here. Or I might not even know that their daughter was engaged, but I knew when Malamars were on sale at ShopRite. It was just fun connecting with people over something even as silly as a cookie.
Did you ever find it hard to find subject matter for a recurring column like that?
Well, somehow life would happen, and a topic would emerge, because that's what I talked about, was life in the suburbs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there somehow was always something, whether it was our garden, where I was talking about why you should eat squash blossoms, or trying to find wall art for our house, and there was always something that a lot of people could relate to, because they might have had a garden, or they might be looking to furnish and accessorize their house too, and it was those universal topics and ideas that made it fun.
So at what point did you start? I know that you've also written essays for some different anthologies and things like that. When did you start branching out into other areas?
Probably 10 years ago. I was trying to find a place for my essays other than the column and my blog, and I started attending the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop. It's held in Dayton, Ohio every 2 years, and that's a way to continue her legacy. It's a small, intimate conference of just a few hundred people, and people who are humor lovers and love to read and write about humor. And it was so much fun going to those conferences and learning more about how to make something funny, and how when you're writing about humor, it's the rule of threes, 3 things in a row, and then the punchline is on the third, just things like that. But also, what was the best about it was connecting with other people, meeting people. And through that, I met people who wrote these series, or who were working on anthologies. And through those connections, I was able to submit some of my essays and get them accepted into some books. So that was my first foray into the publishing world.
What did kind of switching gears to different subject matter and a different deadline, maybe a different word count structure? How did morphing to a different type of writing? Do you think that opened up your creativity?
Oh, for sure, because I had those 500-word essays down pat, And I always, when I would write them, I always had a sense of where the arc needed to be, the beginning, middle, of end, where I arrive at those 500 words. When I started my novel, As Long as It's Perfect, it was a completely different beast because it wasn't going to stop at 500 words, and it had a much larger arc that would, last to 80,000 words, and that was really challenging for me. However, I think if those readers who will read the book will see that each chapter it's all kind of self-contained. It's almost as if I could go to a reading and read an entire chapter, and it almost has a beginning, middle, end. Each chapter almost has its own arc, because I think that was just what came naturally to me. But then, of course, there's the bigger arc as well. So I think that's how I managed that switch.
The new book, which came out yesterday, by the way, so it's available for everyone to go grab a copy of now, called As Long as It's Perfect. Where did this story, this is a bigger story and it's a lot more in-depth and involved, as a novel, where did the idea for this thing start percolating?
Right. Well, my book was, it's a novel, and it was inspired by true events. In 2007, my husband and I set out we actually demolished a home and rebuilt it.
I'm breaking out in hives thinking about it.
Yeah, right. Well, this was just about when the financial collapse was on its way. Well, of course, we didn't really realize how terrible things were going to become. But there are aspects of Janie, the main character. She and I share some experiences and some personality traits. But the book is about this woman named Janie who's absolutely obsessed with perfection and how far she'll go to get what she wants, no matter the cost to herself and her family. The book is set in Rye, New York, where she lives with her husband, Wim, and their 3 kids. And she builds this house in her desperate search for happiness. She goes on a construction bender, spending money she doesn't have on a quest for perfection that nearly ruins her marriage. But again, there's it's a dramedy. So if you think This Old House meets War of the Roses with a little Ricky and Lucy thrown in, that's my novel.
Well, the need for some levity in the midst of tragedy is evident on the cover. If anyone who's ever owned a house, when you see the cover of this book, there's like a wall that's been knocked out. There's this, lovely paper, wallpaper on either side, and the floor is just strewn with, busted sheetrock and all of this. And, right in the center of the hole is the title of the book, As Long as It's Perfect. And it makes me laugh because before I even opened the book, I said, oh, I've been down this path before. And there's nothing that will challenge your marriage or your relationship with your kids like working on a house will. Like such a great topic for a book.
Yes, if there was ever a litmus test for marriage survival, I think it's home renovation. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, how did the planning start for this book? So you're, like you said earlier, you're used to that 500 words, and you could, sit down and I used to write an article for our newspaper too. And when you fall into that groove, man, you can just almost, nail it without even counting. You just kind of know the rhythm of what that feels like. Well, when you've got a big, expansive story like this, how do you begin to plan that out?
Yeah, some writers will write very detailed outlines, but my outline really started out as the outline of our home construction manual that really turned narrative along the way as I was trying to capture these just incredible experiences and anecdotes that I was experiencing each day at a time. So it was really almost like a diary that of true life experience that was inspiring some of the thoughts, the emotions, and the experiences that happen. Those are the experiences that inspired the scenes in my book. And once I started writing, I couldn't even stop. This book just had to get written. I couldn't even contain myself. As I said, I was a stay-at-home mom for many years, and I think often people just don't. People would say, "Well, what do you do all day?" And I really felt so unimportant.
What a rude question.
Yeah, right. I think they just didn't realize, those who had never experienced a full-time parenting, and how that question made me feel so unimportant and unproductive. So once I started writing, it was just so exhilarating and freeing, and to be able to just tap into this playful side of me that I really hadn't tapped into for so long. And I would wake at 4 o'clock in the morning, and my eyes would just boing, and I would race downstairs, and I couldn't wait to get to my computer and start tapping at those keys. And I would tap, tap, tap until my family started waking, and I had to start making breakfast.
Did you see the end of the book from the beginning?
Well, I've had several different versions of the book. So, it started out totally comedic. The title then was Building a House Without Killing Your Spouse.
That's pretty fantastic on its own. You may want to hold that back.
But then I was taking writing classes, and my teacher said it's just not standing on its own with humor. She says, you need to add depth, dramatize it, dig deeper. She kept urging me. It was like poking me with a cattle prod. Dig deeper. So I did, and then I overwrote. It was melodramatic, and then I had a very skilled editor, thank goodness, who came in and saved me from that fateful curse of overwriting. And so it went from the first version to a second to the third, which was sort of in between. And each version had a slightly different ending. And I think it landed in a place where it belonged. And that editor, she helped me. She had a vision that I didn't have. My version was linear, and I knew it didn't work. It didn't give the book enough interest. And she helped me create two storylines. One is the backstory, where Janie is a young girl who is struggling with separation anxiety and a sense of she's seeking a sense of belonging in her world, and how those traits played out into her later into her adulthood and into this obsession with the house and perfectionism, and how it creates a lot of challenges for her. So the book really, it morphed, and it changed a lot with the help of others.
Yeah. And along with you, probably, I know we tend to have a personal growth along with the book a lot of times and discover more things about ourselves. And, you said that it began being sort of autobiographical in some ways. Do you feel like you changed as a person in the writing of this book?
Yeah, I've changed in so many ways. But for sure, the book is about the struggle of this woman in the world, how she appears in the world versus how she really is, and the reconciliation of these things. And it raises questions like, when is it okay to stop trying to create a certain image, and when can I just be who I am? And, it's about battling the demons about what everyone else thinks. And I think like so many of us, we fall into this trap of keeping up with the Joneses, and no matter what the consequences are, right? It can be exhausting, and I do have this perfectionist bent to my personality, and I've spent my life worried about what people think of me, and I think that we want things because we want to feel good enough, and I think through writing this book and seeing how my character evolves, she may not go through a complete transformation, but she does become aware of her flaws, even if she doesn't overcome them. And I hope it's her mistakes that help humanize her and make the story more relatable.
Going back just for a minute to the work that you did with your editor, and when you said that she wanted you to really dig deep, and then you wound up overwriting. I think that happens to a lot of people. Is there anything that you learned from that process that might help you to identify when you are overwriting, or how to identify those places where things are just gotten too big and too flowery, and it just doesn't feel like the truth anymore?
I think it boils down to one simple question that she would ask: does this carry your story forward? And often I'd reread a sentence or a paragraph or a chapter, and I had to be honest with myself and asking myself that question. And sometimes I would say no, and I would have to delete the entire thing, but I knew that it was for the benefit of my book and for my readers.
Right. That's good advice. The book, As Long as It's Perfect, is out everywhere now, paperback and Kindle edition. Lisa, this is such a fantastic book. I love what you're doing. If people are just learning about you, is there a place where they can find you online if they want to connect with you?
Yes, my website is www.lisatognola.com. It's partly under construction right now, so be patient. If you come to it and it's not up and running, give it a day or two. And I'm on every form of social media: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the above. So I love connecting with readers, and I encourage anybody to please connect with me.
Absolutely. Lisa, this has been a lot of fun chatting. Thank you for taking time to come on the show.
It's my pleasure, Hank. Thank you so much for having me.
Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
I was 10 years old when I saw my first ghost. The year was 1770. My father was a barber. He kept a small shop at the Kuenhoven Inn, where the King's Road met the Old Loop. Our modest home lay to the north, between the inn and the hanging tree. A simple box of pine boards whitewashed with crushed oyster shell, one room with a spinning wheel for mother, a chair for father, and up a ladder of branches, a garret where my parents slept. I slept on the floor below, alongside my little brother, Hans, 5 years younger than I. Our floor sloped toward the Hudson, so that when Hans rolled over in his sleep, he often went on rolling and couldn't stop, collecting splinters and grievances. Yet on this particular night, he slept peacefully, and I was the fitful one. A mouse had taken shelter in our wall, fleeing the October chill. It scritched and scratched, nibbling a nest for itself. The sound thrilled me. I possessed a vivid mind, full of toadstools and bullfrogs and lightning storms, and so imagined a skeleton writhed in the wood. The bones of Anne Underhill, perhaps, murdered by Indians at Spook Rock. I'd heard that tale from my father, who reveled in the Dutch superstitions. He would gather us to fireside on winter nights and spin tales of the Heer of Dunderberg, that storm king who rattled our white windows, of the Lady of Raven Rock, who died in snowfall, pining for her lover, of trolls beneath the penny bridge and hobgoblins in the hanging tree. He'd filled my head with such dark romance that I lay waiting for Anne's little finger bones to drag me off to some bloody fate. I rather hoped she would. A cloud cleared the moon, and a square of light fell on my mother's spinning wheel. The sharp spindle glinted, and the wheel began to turn, without touch. A figure appeared before me, as through a mist. A grey head bent to the work. She fixed me with eyes black as open graves and whispered in a low, guttural hiss, "Spin, or you shall not eat." I cried out and fell to my pallet, arms over my head. Hans awoke, lost his balance, and rolled away, bleating with pain as he struck the riverside wall. Father emerged above. "Agatha, what is wrong?" "There's a ghost, Papa! A ghost! Help me!" Hans laughed despite his bruises, and Mother moaned and ordered us to sleep. But Papa descended and took my hands, his blue eyes twinkling. "What did you see?" "An old woman. She said, 'Spin, or you shall not eat.'" "Oh!" He raised a candle beneath his chin. "You saw old Willow. She lived here long ago, when this was the home of Isaac Hart, our candle maker. Her husband was killed by savages. Hart took her in at the request of Lord Phillips, who paid a token sum for her upkeep. But Hart was greedy and kept the money for himself. He never fed her unless she spun. So Willow spun and spun and spun, like a spider, year by year, growing old and blind and falling to waste. She died at that spinning wheel, fell over one day, and the spindle pierced her heart." Hans screamed and hid beneath the table. Mother appeared above. "Daniel Van Ripper, you are a fool!" I kissed Papa's fingers, for I loathed that spinning wheel. I'd be no toothless ghost spinning and haunting little girls. I felt pity for such a spirit and gratitude to have her example before me, steeling my resolve. Every night thereafter, I would leave a crust of bread for old Willow and sleep with one eye open in case she came to spin for me again.